Good morning, everyone, and welcome along to the Blood Red Morning Bulletin. I'm your host today, Patrick Smith, and I'm joined by Liverpool.com's Dave Comerford, and we're talking transfers. Of course, there's not much other news going on around Liverpool. The transfer deadline is 2 days away, and Liverpool still don't have that second defensive midfielder or that centre-back in. But welcome along, everyone. We've got plenty of transfer rumours to talk through today, both ingoing and outgoing. But there's one place to start, isn't there, Dave? It's Mohamed Salah's future now. I personally have hated talking about this topic. I think a lot of it has been complete nonsense. But we need to talk about it either way because the news story is persisting, isn't it? Multiple reports in this past week. The most recent is Johan Bakayoko, pretty prevalent profile on social media, footballer turned pundit. He's basically claimed that Mohamed Salah is likely to leave Liverpool this week. Now, what do you make of this, Dave? I mean, we saw Mohamed Salah have a nice little holiday down in London yesterday, nice day off, didn't we, going around the British Museum? But can you take anything else from this story? Is there a chance we see Mohamed Salah leave before Friday?
I mean, to look at that specific report, I think there's a possibility that we're going to see some hedging of bets, I think, in the next week or so. I think, obviously, if you come out on your profile and say Mohamed Salah is going to go, and then he does, then, you can say, oh, look, I was right on this. It's not kind of something that worries me too much at the moment. Obviously, the whole situation is generally a little bit worrying. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of September 1st being the deadline. Obviously, Klopp's kind of complained already that the Saudi transfer window goes on to, I think, September the 7th, something like a week longer than the Premier League window. You'd think that Liverpool wouldn't do anything. I mean, they're not going to do business anyway, but you think it's especially unthinkable when, they can't bring in a replacement for Salah. But I suppose the effect that has is it kind of extends this story a little bit longer, because I don't necessarily think Al Ittihad are going to give up on this deal, even if the Premier League window is closed. And I think they might come back to it in January as well. I mean, it's what we're seeing here is a story that's just going to run and run until what I think is the pretty much inevitable point that Salah does move to Saudi Arabia. And for me, that's a question of when, not if. Hopefully, for Liverpool's sake, it's still a good few years away, you'd have to say, given the levels that Salah's still performing at. But, I think the story's not going anywhere. I don't think Salah's going anywhere at this moment in time. But, yeah, it's certainly going to be a long-running one, I think.
No, you're spot on. I think we're going to see a lot of these, Twitter accounts, people claiming they're in the know, just, randomly firing out a tweet that they, understand what's happening with this transfer. When a lot of them don't, they are just guessing. And then if it comes true, they look like geniuses, don't they? I mean, that's basically what the angle I think he's going for here. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Look, there is no way Mohamed Salah can leave, this window. It'd just be absolutely baffling at this point. Maybe next year, if you're getting 150 million for him, then you can have the conversation, can't you then, I suppose? But even then, I probably still wouldn't want to sell him the year after. But an interesting story. But as I said at the top of the show, I think a lot of it is nonsense. And as you said, Dave, people trying to just prove that they're in the know when actually they're not. But let's move on then, shall we, to transfer news for Liverpool coming in. Let's move on to winger, shall we? Johan Bakayoko. Pretty interesting one that's sprung out of nowhere. I mean, Liverpool need a midfielder and a centre-back because they're hiding that. But this rumour with the winger, Dave, has popped up yesterday. It's a pretty big one, actually. Young Belgian talent, 20 years old, been compared to Mohamed Salah, made his transfer rumours. What do you make of this one? Pretty interesting player, isn't he?
Yeah, I think, I'm not necessarily sure if I see it happening in the next couple of days, but I think back to January when everyone was like, okay, we desperately need to sign a midfielder. And Liverpool went out and spent, 45 million or something on Cody Gakpo instead. Kind of sprung a surprise with that one. I mean, Bakayoko in particular, I think, hopefully kind of just stays at PSV. I think they've got, I think it's tonight they're playing Rangers in the second leg of the Champions League qualifying. So I read the other day that they wanted to keep him certainly on board for that game. Whether something happens in the next couple of days after that, I don't know. But I think from Liverpool's perspective, you want him to kind of stay for the rest of the season, and then you kind of see basically where you're at, because I suspect that Liverpool's plan is to keep Mohamed Salah for another couple of years at least, and then potentially to bring in Ben Doak as kind of their own Bukayo Saka figure, who can kind of be that academy graduate. I know he's only been here a couple of years, but still, coming out of the academy to basically, step up and avoid having to spend millions and millions on a replacement. So I think what Liverpool would like to do is kind of keep tabs on these wingers emerging in Europe who could fill that role, and then just sort of see how Ben Doak progresses. I think this season is going to be big for him in terms of playing first team minutes. And if he kind of shows signs that he's got kind of world-class potential himself, then I don't think we'll see anyone come in the next couple of windows. But if they start to think, well, hang on, no, we probably are going to need to spend big on someone here, then Bakayoko might be someone who's at the front of the queue, because the link does look quite serious. I mean, I've written about him on the site, and one of the interesting things is that he actually benefited a lot from Cody Gakpo leaving last year, and Madueke going to Chelsea as well in the same window. Basically wasn't really figuring too heavily before that, but then towards the end of the season gets like a prolonged run. I think he got his first senior Belgium call up at the same time as Romeo Lavia, to bring that name back into discussion. So yeah, he looks like a very exciting talent. He's got kind of a really interesting profile too. I think I've seen Josh Williams write as well for the site that he's got kind of this quite precious commodity for Liverpool of being a right winger who's left-footed as well. So he's able to kind of to cut in as Salah can, and looks like a very good dribbling threat as well. So definitely a very intriguing player, and I think probably at the start of what will be a big season for him. And if you're Liverpool, like I say, I think you want that time to assess both him and Ben Doak before you decide what your kind of full plan is for that right wing succession.
Yeah, as I agree with you, I think Ben Doak is definitely the long-term future. Hopefully we don't see Mohamed Salah leave within the next year. I think if he leaves maybe next year, then you have this conversation. But yeah, again with Bakayoko, I'd be surprised if he left. I think a lot of it probably will hinge, because he's linked with a lot of other clubs in the Premier League. I think it's Aston Villa and Burnley are the main other two. I think a lot of it will hinge on whether they progress in the Champions League tonight, to be honest, because PSV had a pretty busy window. I mean, they brought in Serginho Dest, Malik Tillman, a couple of players. Obviously, they picked to the title last season by Feyenoord, I think, weren't they? So Liverpool signing Gakpo probably derailed their title ambitions. Sorry about that one. But let's move on, shall we, to some more transfer rumours. Let's go through the two outgoings from Liverpool that we could see, actually. So Nat Phillips is the first one, Dave. Finally, is Nat Phillips going to get his transfer away? The poor bloke has been stuck at Liverpool now for years. He's still only 26, surprisingly, but Leeds and Feyenoord are the latest to be linked with him. Do you think we'll finally see Nat Phillips get that move that he deserves before Friday? Do you think poor old Nat could be stuck in the training ground until January again?
I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of the time with this story, which has been ongoing for multiple windows in terms of is Phillips going to go finally, it's got to the stage where initially I was like, you want the money in for Liverpool to do their own business, but now I just kind of want him to get the move just for his own good, because you can't help but feel sort of sorry for a player when they're just kind of in complete limbo, like Phillips is. I mean, he barely played at all last season, and never as a player needed to kind of almost get out of a football club more, just to kind of, you mentioned there, 26, not old in a football perspective, but also like he should be coming into, his kind of prime years now. So it's sort of like, yeah, I think he just needs it, and hopefully Liverpool can sort something, because it's definitely going to suit all parties. I think the added factor within this now is that obviously Kwanzaa's come on, made his Premier League debut, look good. It seems like he's kind of, I think it will only be one of Phillips and Kwanzaa that leaves, because if Liverpool aren't going to get a centre back, which looks increasingly likely, then they need to basically have someone, have someone there as kind of the fifth choice option, just that kind of reserve, really, just in case they're needed, if there's, the pile up of injuries or something like that. So I think, I'm optimistic on this one. I think, Phillips will hopefully get his move. Kwanzaa will be that maybe fifth choice player behind them as that youngster. And hopefully kind of, it can be sort of thank you and goodbye at last, because it feels like we've been waiting sort of maybe 3 years for this now, or something ridiculous. Yeah,
good point you make with Kwanzaa, actually. I think, what I've seen of both players in the past year, I've probably seen as much of both of them in that past year or so. I think Kwanzaa is clearly the better player, better on the ball, quicker. I mean, look, we love Nat Phillips. He's been an amazing servant, that amazing job he did in 2021. But every time he plays Liverpool now, you do hold your breath when the ball goes near him, if we're being brutally honest. So hopefully Nat can get that move for him. He really deserves it, you said. Maybe kickstart his career, because he could be a fantastic player in the lower end of the Premier League. I've got no doubts about that. So yeah, let's hope Nat can get that move. But another Liverpool centre-back who's been receiving transfer rumours is Joe Gomez. And there's lots of Saudi Arabian rumours. I think Al Ittihad, where Fabinho went, is one of the main ones. But also West Ham have been discussing a deal after their move from Maguire fell through. Pretty interesting on this, Dave, late on the window. Let's say, hypothetically, West Ham make an appropriate bid, probably in the 30, 40 million region. Would you consider selling Gomez for that?
I don't think so. I think if it was earlier in the window, then you can't argue with that kind of money at all. But now you're in a situation where, okay, so you get that money in, you scramble for a replacement, but you still kind of, I mean, maybe you get someone who's an upgrade on Gomez, obviously late in the window, so that's hard to know. But you still kind of find yourself in the same position or a similar position in terms of you're a little bit short-staffed in that area. Maybe needing someone else. So I don't think it makes any sense to do business now. I wonder if the Al Ittihad links are a little bit kind of, it kind of is hard to separate it from the Mohamed Salah stuff and just maybe trying to, create a bit of disruption. I don't know. Just speculating there, obviously. But yeah, I think Gomez is similar to Phillips in the sense that he does kind of need to leave. I think a club like West Ham would probably be ideal for him in terms of the level they're at and the level he's at the moment in his career. To be honest, although maybe you could argue that certainly on his better days, he's a Champions League level player. Maybe one of those was last weekend against Newcastle. But yeah, I think, again, it just doesn't work at the moment. I don't think there's any incentive for Liverpool to sell him at the moment, even if they get a really good offer. Maybe one that gets revisited next summer because he's not going to stick around forever now that as soon as Konate came in, really, I think that was the moment where it was like, yeah, I mean, Gomez is no longer really the future in this defence. And at that point, maybe it did become a matter of time before he was sold, but I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to work in the next couple of days, like I say.
No, that'd be an unbelievable decision if they were to sell him with 2 days to go and then probably not bring someone in. I mean, that would cause absolute uproar, wouldn't it? I do agree with you, though. For Gomez's sake, individually, if he wants to get back in the England squad, I think he needs to move. He seems to be happy at Liverpool, though, and obviously signed that huge contract, didn't he, last season or the season before, so he's going to be Liverpool for some time, potentially. But yeah, if I was Joe Gomez, I'd maybe be looking at that move away if you want to get yourself back in the England squad. A club like West Ham could be good for him, actually, because they've made a few smart signings this season. I'm not saying he's going to move now. I'd be very surprised if he did. But hypothetically, of course, a club like that, playing in Europe, pretty relatively nice footballing side. Well, actually, horrible footballing side in the Moors. Don't know what I'm saying there. But yeah, I think that would be good for Gomez, maybe play himself into a higher side in the Premier League. But yeah, for now, I think Liverpool would be stupid to sell him at this point. But let's move on to the last transfer we'll discuss. This show's been a bit of a mess, hasn't it? I mean, if that's any indictment on Liverpool's transfer strategy this window, it certainly is, because this has gone all over the shop. But let's end with Cheick Doucoure, shall we, Dave? He's probably the main one that Liverpool supporters, everyone in Liverpool media would like to see happen, I think, isn't it? 23 years old, valued at 70 million, and he was left out of Crystal Palace's squad for their League Cup match with Plymouth last night. I mean, take from that what you will. It's a second-round League Cup match. Players do get dropped. But do you think this is any indication that Palace are maybe looking to sell him, Dave, or are listening to offers?
I think that's unfortunately wishful thinking because, like you say, it's just an early League Cup tie. And I think I saw on Twitter that Anderson, the centre-back, who's also one of their most important players, was left out too. So I think, yeah, there's no story here at the moment. For me, the sense I get from what I've kind of read on social media and, in the reporting is that Liverpool obviously admire as the player, but they just think he's too expensive. And it's kind of strange because the defensive midfield need has been there so long, and you start to think to yourself, well, if he was too expensive a few weeks ago, he's going to be even worse now. So you can kind of probably rule it out on that standpoint. But then again, you just don't know how Liverpool operate anymore. I mean, there could be a sense of panic. I mean, I get the feeling that if Darwin Núñez hadn't scored those 2 late goals the other day, that Liverpool might have actually signed someone by now. And I know that's a strange thing to say, but part of me thinks that, how sort of last season we saw Liverpool have this really poor start to the season. I think they had 1 point after 3 games as opposed to 2 points, after 3 games as opposed to having 7 now. And part of me thinks, they look at the league table and like, oh no, we're fine. But you've got to really kind of look at those performances and what's actually happening within the games, not just the results. And that's what I'm worried that Liverpool are doing. And that's why I think they're probably saying, oh, we've got 7 points from 9. That's about where we want to be. We've had hard fixtures. We're fine in defensive midfield. Maybe another midfielder, another centre-back would be a nice luxury for us, but it's not essential. I think that would be a pretty big mistake for Liverpool to make.
Yeah.
That's what I think is happening right now. I don't think Doucoure is going to happen. I think if there is going to be a midfielder, it'll be Bayern basically given the green light to sell Gravenberch, Liverpool going head-to-head with Man United for him. And then a centre-back, I think. It kind of feels with the centre-back situation that Liverpool are just waiting for a phone call from an agent saying X club is ready to do business for this price. And then maybe...
Here's Gonzalo Inacio.
Yeah, exactly. But until that moment arrives, I don't think they'll do any. And to be honest, I think it could be a busy January this year, whether out of necessity or whether because players become available. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily feel like anything's imminent on Doucoure or anyone else at the moment, unfortunately.
I've got a terrible feeling similarly that because it's so quiet and there's been so much noise this window and it's so hard to keep transfers under the rug now, I've got a terrible feeling they're not going to sign. What did you say? They're 7 points from 9. It'd be such a Liverpool and FSG thing to do, wouldn't it? To not spend the money. They clearly had to bid on Caicedo. But then I do understand, I suppose, as well, that it could be a luxury in the sense that if you're going to sign a very, very expensive defensive midfielder like a Caicedo, who's probably worth it. I know he's been shocking for Chelsea so far, but he's clearly worth that money. Is Cheick Doucoure actually worth £70 million? Or is Polina at Fulham worth £70-80 million? I don't actually think so. As much as Liverpool need that position, you could argue they need to spend that money in this skewed market. I think also, use your brain here. I don't think Cheick Doucoure is worth £70 million, but that's just my personal opinion. Interesting to see if any transfers do get done. We're really praying that we have some to talk about over the next 2 days, not just speculation. So make sure, everyone, that you're here on the Blood Red channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube and whichever platform you get your podcasts from. And, of course, Liverpool.com, Twitter, Facebook, and, of course, the website for all the brilliant articles and the latest transfer news and updates. We've got loads of content coming up for you. We've got the Liverpool.com podcast today. We've got the brilliant Analysing Anfield podcast tomorrow as well, Blood Red on Friday. And, of course, a live show for the Europa League draw. And we'll probably have a live stream as well on transfer deadline day on Friday, bringing you the latest on any news as Liverpool hope to get some players across the line. But, yeah, for myself, Patrick Smith, and Dave Comerford, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you again soon on the Morning Bulletin.